Welcome to What You Really Want to Know. I am attorney Amanda Shaffer. Today we are going to answer the question, what is the difference between unlawful status and unlawful presence? Before I get to that, quick reminder, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you're watching. And if you find this video to be helpful or know someone who may, please hit that share button. Okay. So, what is the difference between unlawful presence and unlawful status? This is something that confuses a lot of people, which is why I'm addressing it here today. And it can have some very important immigration consequences depending on which one is applicable. Unlawful status means that you entered the U.S. lawfully, so with a visa waiver, parole, and that you fell out of lawful status. So what does that mean, to fall out of unlawful status? Well, the first way you can fall out of unlawful status, and the most common way, is called an overstay. So that means you stayed past the date that you were told you're allowed to remain in the U.S. So let's look at an example. You enter the U.S. and you are told with a B2 visitor visa, and you're told by May 1st, 2023, you need to leave the U.S. It is now June 27th, 2023, and you're watching me talk about this, and you're still in the U.S. You have fallen out of status. You've overstayed your visa. That's just one way. There are several different ways. I'll give you a few more examples. You enter the country as a student on an F1 visa. You're supposed to maintain a full course load, but without permission, you drop below a full course load. You are out of status. If you work without authorization in the U.S., you are out of status, even if you entered lawfully. If you're K1 on a K1 visa, so you came here as a fiance, you're supposed to marry your fiance in 90 days. 90 days pass, you're still in the U.S., but no wedding ring. You are out of status. And any type of criminal activity may cause you to violate the terms and conditions of your status, putting you out of status. And the last example I'll give is if you came here on a work visa, like an H-1B or a TN, and you lose your job or you quit your job and you remain in the U.S. past the date that you were allowed or past that grace period, and you failed to file to change your status before then, you are out of status. Being out of status can have some very important immigration implications. The main one is that if you want to apply for certain immigration benefits, if you want to change your status, in most cases adjust your status, you need to be in lawful immigration status. And the second you fall out of it, you lose that ability. So what is unlawful presence? Unlawful presence means that you've also entered the U.S. lawfully, so with a visa waiver, parole, that you fell out of status and you have accrued, and when you fell out of status, you accrued unlawful presence. So they're actually not even two terms that you could switch around. It's unlawful presence doesn't happen until you're in unlawful status. And one of the things that's kind of confusing about the immigration law is if you entered the U.S. illegally, like you crossed the border, didn't have a visa or any permission to enter the country, you never accrue unlawful presence because you never were in lawful status to begin with. So if you're never in lawful status, you cannot be then in unlawful status, you cannot accrue unlawful presence. That is what the law says. Now, you may be thinking that sounds ridiculous. So wouldn't it benefit me to enter the country illegally? No, it would not benefit for you to enter the country illegally, especially because you need to have a valid entry for most immigration benefits. And even if you marry a U.S. citizen, this is one of those things that If you didn't enter the country legally, you're going to have to leave the U.S. to do consular processing to get a green card if you become eligible in the future based on marriage to a U.S. citizen. So it is not ideal, and you need a waiver. So it is not an ideal situation at all. So what really is important about unlawful presence is that the amount of time you're in the unlawful presence can affect your ability to re-enter the U.S. So if you overstay your visa, or you are out of status for 180 to 364 days, and you leave the U.S., you're going to trigger a bar to re-entry. You will not be able to re-enter the U.S. for at least 3 years. If you stay in unlawful status for more than a year, then you're going to, when you leave, trigger a bar to re-entry of 10 years. Now, not only will you not be allowed in for that set period of time, you may have additional problems. You may never be able to come back to the U.S. They may deny any future visas for you. They may cancel the visa that you have, even if it's still valid for multiple entries. If you came on a visa waiver or ESTA, you can lose your ESTA. So very significant consequences for unlawful presence. So where does the confusion really come into play? I've been seeing this I've seen this a lot over my career. And really this comes into play for somebody who entered the country lawfully, applied for some immigration benefit. While the immigration benefit was pending, they fall out of status. But because they filed while in lawful status, it preserves I don't think preserve is the right way, it stops the unlawful presence from accruing. And which is important, because if you want to leave the country, let's say you decide, you know what, I've seen this happen before, people lose their job, and before they lose their job, they change to a visitor visa, and because they need to, let's say, wrap up whatever they're doing, look for a new job, all that type of thing, and then, they're ready to leave the U.S. before the change of status to the visitor visa is even approved. Well, the good news is they can leave the U.S. and they preserved, even though they technically fell out of status, they preserved their, or again, I'm using the word preserved, they stopped the unlawful presence clock from accruing, so they're not going to have any issues, or shouldn't have any issues re-entering. Another situation where this has come up is let's say you entered on a visitor visa and applied for asylum, and you applied within the 6 months while you're in lawful status. Again, when you do something like that, it will, if you submit an application to change your status, extend your status, adjust your status while you're in lawful status, it will stop unlawful presence from accruing the second you go out of status. If it takes longer for the new immigration application to be adjudicated. However, it doesn't mean you're in lawful status. It means just that you're not accruing unlawful presence, but you are in unlawful status if you're past the date of expiration. So if you applied for asylum, let's say you applied in 2018. Again, you applied while in lawful status. 3 years later, which, because it's taking forever these days, you get a job offer and they want to apply for an H-1B for you. You have not accrued any unlawful presence, but you're also not in lawful status. In order to apply for an H-1B, you're required to be in lawful status, as with most change of status, so it's going to get denied if you were to file. And that's a really significant difference, because we have that situation happen a lot where people apply for one thing and don't realize that in order to apply for the other benefit, like, you cannot have gone out of status. Even though you have not accrued unlawful presence, they go at they're related but kind of affect two different things. So how do you check if you're out of status? Well, the number one way to check is to talk to an experienced immigration attorney like myself. And if you haven't noticed, our contact information has been scrolling across the bottom of your screen. We would be happy to help. So one way you can do it is you can go online to this website, type in, click on most recent entry to get your I-94. You put in your name, birthday, passport number, country that you're from, and it will show you your most recent entry. This used to be on a little white piece of paper that they stapled in your passport. Now it's all electronic. So if you entered, I think, before 2013, maybe even 2016, then it's going to be on paper. But I can tell you, you've overstayed and accrued unlawful presence, almost 100% likely. But otherwise, you can go onto this website and see, and it will tell you the date you entered, your status, and the date you need to leave by. If you're a student, you might see an F1 student or J1, we'll see this a lot, D/S, meaning duration of status. Doesn't mean you can stay here forever. You could stay here as long as you are complying with the terms and conditions of visa, and for an F1 means you continuing to take full course load at school. For J1, that you are following the terms and conditions of your program. If you do not have an I-94, which happens, sometimes it happens, I type in a client's name, it's just not there. Or if you changed your status in the US, you're not going to have an I-94 that accurately reflects the date you have to leave, because you get the I-94 when you enter, not when you change your status, but you do get an approval notice. And the date on your approval notice will tell you when you're authorized to remain here until. But again, it's not always clear because there are other factors that come into play, which is why I recommend reaching out to an experienced immigration attorney like myself to ensure, before you waste any money on legal fees or filing fees for an immigration benefit, make sure that you are eligible. And this is whether you're in the US right now or outside the US. One of the first things we ask potential clients when they call us about benefits is we ask them, if they're in the US, is this your first time? Have you ever had any immigration violations? If they're outside the US, have you ever been to the US? If yes, did you ever have any immigration violations? Every single time, that's how we start off our consultations, because that can immediately eliminate certain immigration benefits. So to wrap up, this is I know a confusing concept that we're talking about. That's why we're talking about it, and hopefully I've kind of broken it down for you a little bit and cleared it up. But essentially, we looked at the difference between unlawful status and unlawful presence. Unlawful status happens when you are no longer in compliance with the terms and conditions of your visa, or your immigration status, which can mean an overstay, stopping school, working without permission, criminal activity, things like that. Unlawful presence starts to count when that day that you stop being in status. And the unlawful presence is what they add up to see if you leave the US, what bar to reentry can be triggered. So they're not the same thing. They're not interchangeable. And just because you preserve your ability to not accrue unlawful presence doesn't mean that you're in lawful status. So if you do have any questions about this, especially about your own immigration status or possible accrual of unlawful presence, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, our contact information is scrolling across the bottom of your screen. If you found this video to be helpful or know someone who may, please hit that share button. And don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, so you don't miss any of our videos. Thank you all for watching What You Really Want to Know. I am attorney Amanda Shaffer. Have a great day.